Three little-known landmarks in Montgomery, Alabama played an intricate role in the civil rights movement. Malden Barber Shop, 407 South Jackson Street. The Harris House, 333 South Jackson Street. The Dexter Avenue Baptist Church Parsonage Museum, 309 South Jackson Street. The following presentation will give you a preview of these historic landmarks. But remember, there is nothing like seeing it for yourself.
I started cutting Reverend King here at the other barber shop. I was younger barber there in 1954. And so when I saw this young man get out of the car, I said, ooh, I had a 10 o'clock class that morning, about 25 minutes of 10 at that time. So I looked at his head, I said, well, I could knock him out at least 15 minutes. So when he came in the shop, he asked him, where was he from? He got in the chair. He said, that's what your name is, Martin Luther King. I said, where you from? I said, Atlanta, Georgia. That's what you doing in town. He said, I'm here to preach my proud sermon at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. I said, oh, that's not church. He said, I'm glad to meet you. So after I finished cutting, I gave him the mirror to say he liked his haircut. And he said, that's pretty good. So you know when you tell a barber pretty good, that's kind of an insult. So he said, so he came back 2 weeks later, he waited on me when the other barber was vacant. I was busy, but he waited on me. So when he got in the chair, I said, that must have been a pretty good haircut. He said, you're all right. So after I cut his hair about 7 or 8 times, I noticed he never would give me a tip. But I was wondering that he really liked my service enough. So most times when a person really likes your service, they give you a little tip. So I started out using the psychology on him. I said, Rev, I said, when you finish preaching a sermon on Sunday and some of the members tell you what a good sermon, I said, doesn't that make you feel good? He said, yes. I said, when you go to a restaurant, you have a nice meal and the waiter give you good service and you give her a tip, I said, don't you think that make her feel good? He said, yes. So he got out the chair, he grabbed my hand and held it real tight. He said, do you put 10% of your earnings in church? I said, Rev, I'm a student at Alabama State College. I cannot afford to put 10% of my earnings in church. I think he used a little profanity. He said, Ellen, Pastor Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and I can't afford to tip you either. So anyway, after something, but most times he lived about a half a block from the barber shop. And most times he would come in the shop, he would take a seat back here because he didn't want to take up seats in the front of the shop, block the other customers. So sometimes he would come down through the daytime, get away from his children, and do a little reading in the barber shop. Sometimes he'd do a little writing. And so he came in one day and was 2 old men sitting right beside him. And one of those men started coughing. And the man said, oh man, what are you taking for your cold? He said, man, I'm taking aspirin orange juice. He said, man, the best thing for your cold is take you some turpentine and some ice cream salt and put it on a handkerchief and put it in your chest at night. And I guarantee you your cold will be gone the next morning. And so there were 2 students up at Alabama State students up in front of the barber shop. And so one of the students that got a ticket was doing 40 miles an hour in the 30-mile zone. And so the other boy said, man, you wouldn't have got that ticket if you know how to talk to white folks. You ran there saying yes or no. If you would have said yes or no, so that white man wouldn't have given you that ticket. So the 2 old men left, and 2 boys left, and 2 students left from Alabama State. And so the other 2 barbers went to lunch, and I was finished at my last customer. So Reverend King got out of the chair. He said, you know what, Barber? I've been to many places and many universities, but I learned more in this barber shop than I believe I ever learned in my life. I said, what's that, Rev? He said, barber shop medals will get you in the cemetery, and barber shop law will get you in prison. So after I finished, so one day after he came back, after getting a little bit of Peace Prize, I said, Rev, I remember what you said about barbershop law and barbershop medals. I said, what did you say about barbershop philosophy? He said, barbershop philosophy will get you in the crazy house.
I remember that they were picked up at the bus station and brought here. And they needed medical care as well as cleaning up physically, you know. My husband was living at the time, and he took care of everything. He had a drugstore downtown that he owned, and he took care of all their medical needs. We just went from there. I mean, the house was big enough to hold a lot of people, but that was a lot of people, more than we had planned on. But it did work out very well. It did. We had fond memories of the Freedom Riders coming through. They were waylaid down at the bus station, and some were hurt. All of them weren't, but they managed to get, picked up and brought to some secure place.
Tell them how the males and the females interacted? You used to tell us about how they made the females made sure that
Oh yeah, we had females and males in the house, and the females made sure that the guys were all taken care of. They got their clothes all clean for them, washed them, and yeah, my guy had a washing machine in the area for that. They saw to it that had clean clothes, they were pressed, and they looked the part to get on that bus and leave Montgomery. But I missed out.
the day that they left.
Yes.
And you remember how that was the day that they left, when you say they lined up in the hallway?
Oh yes, that was a sad moment. They lined up in the hallway and they looked like lions going to the slaughter. That was the only thing I could think of at the time. But they left here in good shape. And when we heard from them, they were in happy surroundings.
That's good.
So,
Not necessarily, they were in the jail. They were in the jail.
well, but they were together.
Yeah.
That was the main thing. They were not alone.
He got out of the bed, started to pace the floor, and he ends up right here in this kitchen around midnight. Told us exactly what he did. He said he warmed up a cup of coffee, poured that cup of coffee, and he sat at the table. He was already a preacher, but he said on that night he knew he had to know the God that his mother and father taught him about for himself. He said, Mama couldn't help me, Daddy couldn't help me, nobody could help me. His parents were 175 miles away, up in Atlanta, Georgia. His best friend was sleeping in the master bedroom, Coretta. And he ends up in here in this kitchen, alone, around midnight, just like Jesus went in the Garden of Gethsemane and prayed out loud. And that prayer went something like this. Lord, I'm down here. I'm trying to do what's right. I think the cause we represent is right, but I must admit, I'm losing my courage. All of a sudden, he starts to feel a strong stirring in his chest. And he didn't say he heard voices, but he said he heard an inner voice. And that voice called him by name. If the voice had not called him by name, he could have hidden in the crowd with everybody else. But it wasn't like that. The voice called him by name. People tried to deify Martin Luther King. He was no deity. I believe the best description would be a scared prophet who ended up in this kitchen by his own admission to try to figure out how to get out of Montgomery without appearing to be a coward. His father was just like Vernon Johns, in your face, see a good fight, get in it. But he cried when he couldn't get his son not to come back to Montgomery to lead this bus boycott. So this young preacher is praying out loud, asking God to take this cup away from him, just the way Jesus did to his father in the Garden of Gethsemane. And here's the voice he heard. Martin Luther, stand up for truth. Stand up for justice. And stand up for righteousness. And lo, I will be with you always, even until the end of the world. All of a sudden, right here in this kitchen, around midnight, all of the fears left him. It was a turning point, a defining moment, a revelation, a word from God. It was an epiphany. And you heard it crystal clear the night before he died, and I've been to the mountaintop. What did he say? I'm happy tonight. Here's the crux of the matter. I'm not fearing any man. I just want to do God's will because he's allowed me to go up to the mountaintop. You know the rest. I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. But I ask everyone, where did he lose those fears? And if anybody asks you, you tell them 309 South Jackson Street, Montgomery, Alabama, January 27, 1956, right here in this kitchen, around midnight. This is as close as you're going to get to hallowed ground on earth, right here, where a young preacher came in this kitchen to figure out how to get out of Montgomery without appearing to be a coward.